Hello. My name is Arad Yakin. And while I was lying in a hospital bed with a catheter in my arm and morphine numbing my spine, my family forged my signature, sold my home, and told people I had died. And that was just the beginning. The driver didn't offer to help with the bags. I didn't ask. The tires had barely stopped rolling when I opened the door, my fingers stiff from hospital bandage impressions that still left their ghost across my wrist. The air outside was crisp. Portland in early fall always carried that faint breath of smoke, like someone down the block was clinging to one last fire pit evening before the rain truly claimed the season. The wheels of my suitcase caught slightly on the uneven sidewalk. That used to annoy me. I'd planned to have the paving redone in spring. But now I stood still in front of the house I'd spent 10 years paying for and 5 years turning into a home. My key was already in my hand. I'd been gripping it too tightly for too long. The metal left a red imprint in my palm, funny how memory can do the same. I stepped up the porch. No welcome mat. No ceramic planter I'd painted in a fit of nostalgia 2 summers ago. The porch light, unscrewed. A spider had claimed the top corner near the arch. The vines I used to prune weekly were wild again, stretching like arms toward places they weren't meant to reach. I inserted the key. It didn't fit. Not even a little resistance. Not even that awkward jiggle it sometimes gave when the humidity swelled the wood. Just no. For a moment, I froze. My hand still on the doorknob, body slightly leaned as if sheer faith would push me through. My mind refused to register what my body already knew. I checked the address, absurdly. Same house. Same number on the slate tile I'd hung myself. But the mailbox had changed. Sleek, silver. A new lock. A nameplate underneath. The Petersons. I blinked. My last name wasn't Peterson. It never had been. My breath stayed shallow, just beneath my collarbone, as if deeper lungs would make the moment more real. I stepped back, eyes sweeping left to right. New curtains. Fresh doormat. The flowers in the box weren't mine. The porch swing I'd had installed for quiet mornings, gone. I gripped the suitcase handle tighter. 5 years ago, I stood in this same spot with marigold seedlings in a paper tray, soil under my fingernails. I'd closed on the house by myself, brought no one to help me move. When I told my family, they said, "It's your thing. You always do things your way." I thought it was pride. Now I know it was permission to disconnect. I circled around the side of the house. The gate, locked. Another lock I didn't recognize. I pressed my hands against the wooden slats, rising to tiptoe to peer over. Through the kitchen window, dishes in a drying rack, a child's drawing on the fridge, 2 wine glasses on the counter. This wasn't an empty house awaiting my return. It was lived in. Occupied. Claimed. I heard tires against gravel. A boy on a bike passed by, slowing as he noticed me by the fence. He waved casually. "Hi, Mrs. Peterson." The name landed like a slap, bright, offbeat, and wrong. My throat didn't form a response. I just nodded. It was a strange nod. One that said, "I hear you," while my soul whispered, "I'm disappearing." He rode away, unfazed. I was the stranger here. I returned to the front, dragging the suitcase like a soundless protest. It thumped gently against the first step. I didn't sit. I didn't knock. Something about knocking on what was once your own door felt obscene. Instead, I stood there. One hand on the metal rail that I'd had reinforced when my knees started aching during long shifts. I remembered sanding that rail before painting it charcoal gray. Now it was pale blue. Someone else's idea of welcoming. My reflection stared back at me in the small glass pane by the door, pale skin, tired eyes, the faint line of a hospital bracelet still outlined on my wrist like a shadow. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply stood. The silence wrapped around me slowly, like fog slipping over the hill. I thought silence was neutral. Passive. But in that moment, I understood it had weight. It could press against your ribs. It could speak. And it was saying, "You don't belong here anymore." The wind had picked up, carrying the smell of wet asphalt. I sat outside the corner cafe across from the park, a paper cup cooling in my hands. The sound of passing cars felt distant, muffled, like I was under glass. The last 2 hours had been spent walking, not toward anything, just away. My feet had followed muscle memory more than reason. I didn't know where else to go, and maybe that was the cruelest part. I watched the screen of my phone blink to life, the faint reflection of my face over my mother's name. My thumb hovered. It wasn't anger that stopped me, it was habit. Years of anticipating the tone in her voice, the sigh before every conversation. But silence couldn't last forever, and this one belonged to her. I pressed call. "Aradia," she answered, cheerful, like she was expecting me for brunch. "You're out. I was just thinking of you. You sound tired." "I just got home," I said quietly. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Did the doctor clear you for work already?" "Not exactly." My eyes followed a group of joggers crossing the street. "I went home, Mom. My key didn't fit." There was a pause. I heard the faint sound of a spoon tapping against a mug. "Well," she began, light and measured, "there have been changes. You should come by. Let's talk properly." Her voice carried the calm of someone who never expected consequences. 15 minutes later, I was standing in front of her at a cafe table by the window. She waved as though I'd come from a long trip. Her lipstick was perfect, her nails painted pale pink. There was a second cup waiting for me, and beside her chair sat my brother, Dorian. He looked the same, expensive jacket, tired eyes, that careless smile that said, "You can't really be mad at me, I'm me." "Look who's back," he said, grinning. "Our miracle doctor." I didn't sit right away. Why is there another family living in my house? Valora stirred her tea. "Don't start with that tone. We made a decision that helps everyone." "Everyone?" My voice felt steadier than I expected. "You sold my house while I was in the hospital." Valora lifted her gaze, calm as a priest. "And look at you, you're standing, healthy. The hospital did its job, and we did ours." I laughed once, a sound too small to be humor. "You did your job?" She leaned forward, eyes soft but sharp. "Aradia, you have to understand. It wasn't just about you. Your brother's been through enough. We had to save him." I turned to Dorian. "Save you? Again?" He shrugged. "I didn't ask them to, all right?" Mom panicked. "You know how she gets. And honestly, it's not like you can't afford another one." There it was, the familiar justification wrapped in guilt. Valora reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "We've been planning this carefully. Dorian's rebuilding, and this gives him a chance to restart his life. You've always said you wanted the family to be stable." I looked at the folder. Financial printouts, handwritten notes. My handwriting wasn't one of them. Dorian tapped the folder with a manicured finger. "You always act like you're the only one who works hard. You think you're better because you pay your bills on time. Guess what, life isn't that simple." My hands trembled under the table. I pressed my palms together until they stopped. "Do you hear yourself?" He leaned back, smug. "Yeah. Do you?" The cafe was half full, people talking about weather, traffic, lunch. Ordinary noise. I'd never realized how cruel normal could sound when your world was burning quietly in public. Valora sighed dramatically. "Let's not make a scene. We did what families do, we looked out for each other. You've always been too rigid, too individualistic. You have your job, your savings. It's all just numbers, Aradia." "Numbers?" I repeated softly. "That was my home." "You still have your name," she said. "Your degree. Your career. Things can be replaced." I remembered being 17, scraping plates at a diner after school, saving for college application fees. At 30, I paid Dorian's rehab bill without telling anyone. When I asked him to sign a repayment plan, Mom called me cruel. "Family helps family," she'd said. I had believed her. Now I watched her sip her tea while the steam fogged her glasses. "You used me," I whispered. Valora set her cup down gently. "Don't be so dramatic. We made a choice that benefited everyone. You'll understand once the anger fades." Anger. That was her word for it. But this wasn't anger, it was clarity. The kind that came when you'd finally stopped begging people to love you correctly. Dorian laughed, pushing his chair back. "You're overreacting. It's a house, Aradia. You act like we buried you." I looked at him. "You didn't bury me. You just erased me." He frowned, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you can't steal from someone and still call it love." Valora's tone turned cold. "You're twisting this. We did this for you. You've carried too much weight for too long." "For you," I said evenly. "You did it for you." A couple at the next table glanced over. I didn't care. I was done whispering through wounds. Belora reached across, her fingers brushing my wrist. Sweetheart, listen, this isn't worth dividing the family over. You still have us. That's what matters. I pulled my hand back. You don't divide what was never whole. For a heartbeat, she looked startled. Maybe she hadn't expected the stillness in my voice. The restraint unnerved her more than fury ever could. Then Dorian chuckled. Well, I guess congratulations are in order. You're officially homeless. The words hung there, heavy, ridiculous. Belora shot him a look, but the damage had landed. I stood slowly. You think that's funny? He smirked. What? You always act untouchable. Maybe this will humble you. I smiled. It surprised even me. I'm not laughing. Not yet. Belora's voice trembled for the first time. Where are you going? Somewhere you can't sell. The chair scraped against the tile as I turned. The folder still sat on the table, fat with their excuses. I left it there, untouched, a monument to every conversation that ever ended with me apologizing for their choices. Outside, the clouds had thickened. The air smelled like rain and distance. My heart was hollow, but my spine felt taller. Every step away from them was quieter, steadier, more mine. I didn't look back through the cafe window. I didn't need to see their faces to know the expression they shared, confusion disguised as concern. They would tell each other I was being ungrateful. They would rewrite the story until I became the villain who abandoned the family. But for the first time, their version didn't matter. Family was supposed to mean safety. To them, it meant ownership. I walked until my legs ached, the city turning gray around me, the drizzle settling like dust on my skin. The streets blurred, but one thought stayed sharp, how easy it had been for them to trade my trust for convenience. I sat on a bench near the park, hands clasped between my knees, feeling the tremor finally catch up with me. A small boy fed pigeons by the fountain. He laughed as they scattered, free and loud. I closed my eyes. They called it family, I whispered. I called it theft. The rain came back 2 nights later, the steady kind that seeps into everything. I lay awake listening to it beat against the window of the apartment I had rented in haste. The place still smelled like cardboard and tape. Half the boxes stood unopened against the wall. One lamp. One chair. One bed. I'd told myself I was too tired to unpack, but that wasn't true. I was afraid that if I made this place look lived in, it would mean admitting I no longer had a home to return to. Morning arrived gray and quiet. I made instant coffee, drank half, and set it down. My hands kept searching for something to do, wipe a counter, check my phone, delete another message I hadn't listened to. Mom had called 5 times since the cafe. I let everyone go to voicemail. I couldn't bear her voice yet, the practiced calm that could turn a wound into my fault before I'd finished a sentence. The rain softened. I turned on my laptop, meaning only to distract myself. But my fingers hovered over my inbox, drawn to the word property. An old thread from 6 weeks earlier blinked unread. My mother's name wasn't visible, just a company header, Portland Financial Consulting LLC. I clicked. The email was short. Dear Ms. Keene, please confirm digital authorization for transaction review. Standard verification only. Thank you for your prompt attention. Attached was a PDF, one I didn't remember opening, let alone signing. My pulse stumbled. I scrolled to the bottom. The electronic trail glowed blue, DocuSign, signed by Aradia Keene. Date, September 18, 2:42 p.m. I tried to breathe, but the math in my head refused to compute. September 18th. That was the second day of my hospital stay. I'd been under anesthesia that afternoon. I couldn't have signed anything. I couldn't have held a pen. The cursor blinked on the screen like it was taunting me. Slowly, I clicked document details. There it was, IP address, timestamp, verification ID. Everything matched. Everything looked legitimate. Except it wasn't. My chest felt hollow. I whispered to the empty room, they didn't just steal my house. They became me to do it. I grabbed my phone, searching contacts until I found one I hadn't used in years, Liam, a paralegal I'd once helped during his surgery rotation. He still owed me a favor. The call connected on the 3rd ring. Aradia? Wow, it's been. Liam, I need you to look at something, I cut in, voice low but steady. A document was signed in my name while I was hospitalized. I want to know if it's real. He asked me to send it. I did. Then I waited. every second stretched. Rain tapped gently against the glass, as if reminding me that time still moved even when I couldn't. 15 minutes later, his voice returned through the line. I traced the metadata. Whoever sent that email masked their address under the LLC. The signer's IP doesn't match yours. It's linked to a private network registered under Valora Crane. My mother. The world narrowed. I sat down on the floor, the phone cold against my ear. He kept talking, legal terms, identity fraud, digital impersonation, potential felony. I barely heard him. Valora hadn't just sold the house. She'd forged me to do it. When we were children, she used to forge our father's signature on field trip forms when he was away. It's still permission, she'd laugh. I'd thought it was harmless. I never imagined she'd graduate from permission slips to property deeds. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out an old folder, receipts, title deeds, insurance papers. My hand stopped on an envelope yellowed by time, grandfather's will. I hadn't looked at it in years. He'd left the property to me specifically. You made it out, he'd said, patting my shoulder. You built something honest. This will always be yours. After he died, Mom insisted we keep the documents safe. I'd believed her. She locked them away in her cabinet, saying, "We'll all agree what's best when the time comes." That was the first lie. Now, staring at the faded handwriting, I realized the truth wasn't buried, it had been filed, indexed, and repurposed. She had taken something meant as legacy and turned it into leverage. The rain slowed, and for a moment, the silence pressed close again, thick as fog. But this time it didn't paralyze me. It sharpened me. I pulled out my phone and composed a new email. Subject, Fraud Verification Request. Liam, attach all metadata and send to Sutton and Rains, Family Law Division. I'm ready to proceed. Within minutes, my phone rang again. This time it was the senior attorney himself, Mr. Sutton. We'd met once before at a hospital fundraiser. He remembered me. His voice carried both curiosity and gravity. Dr. Keene, what you're describing constitutes a serious offense. If we confirm your digital signature was forged, you have grounds for full civil and criminal proceedings. Are you prepared for that? I looked around the room, the unpacked boxes, the cheap lamp, the suitcase still near the door. I've already lost everything that mattered, I said. All that's left is the truth. He was silent for a moment, then said, "Send me the document. We'll start tonight." When the call ended, I sat for a long time, the laptop's glow reflecting off the window. My reflection stared back, faint and unfamiliar. I'd spent so long being the responsible one, the fixer, the quiet center that held chaos together. Now, there was no one left to fix but me. A memory surfaced uninvited, my grandfather's study, the scent of pipe smoke and cedar. I'd been 15, standing at his desk as he scribbled notes. "Paper doesn't lie, Aradia," he said, sliding the envelope toward me. "People do. Remember that." I hadn't understood it then. I did now. The clock on the microwave blinked 9:03 p.m. I sent every file, every screenshot, every trace of proof to Sutton's office. My hand didn't shake anymore. It moved with purpose, deliberate and calm. When I finally shut the laptop, the rain had stopped. The city outside gleamed under streetlights, every puddle catching reflections like broken glass. I walked to the window, pressed my fingertips against the cold pane, and whispered to the darkness, "You taught me to sign my name with pride, Mom. You forgot I also learned how to defend it." I printed the forged deed from my email, laid it flat on the kitchen counter, and stared at the crooked imitation of my signature. The lines were careful, almost perfect, too perfect. The loops were cleaner than mine, as if she'd practiced. I picked up a pen and wrote my name beside it. The difference was subtle but alive. Mine had pulse, pressure, intention. Hers was imitation. I signed again, slower this time, letting the ink pool gently at the end. Signatures don't lie, I thought, but the hands behind them do. 2 days passed before I could look at that printed deed again. It lay on the counter like a wound left open, daring me to touch it. The ink of her imitation signature had dried to a dull shine. I didn't throw it away. I couldn't. Instead, I slid it between 2 folders and tucked it into my work bag. By Thursday evening, I was back at the hospital, pretending that my life hadn't been carved in half. The smell of antiseptic always steadied me, but that night it felt heavier. The rooftop break area was empty when I stepped outside. From up there, Portland looked like it was holding its breath, cars moving below, lights flickering against glass towers, the rain hanging somewhere between drizzle and fog. I cupped the warm paper cup in my hands, but the coffee had already gone cold. An email notification blinked on my phone, HR's payroll update. I didn't open it. I had no energy left for numbers that still belonged to me. My inbox was full of reminders that the world kept functioning no matter what broke inside you. For a while, I just watched the city hum below. I'd worked almost every weekend for years, staying late, covering shifts. I used to joke that my home was just a closet with a mortgage. Funny how the joke outlived the mortgage. The memory came quietly, uninvited. Dorian in 2015, calling me at midnight because his credit card had been declined. He'd been between jobs, which meant the same thing it always did, he'd quit another one after 2 weeks. "You're good with money," he said. "Can you co-sign a small loan? Just until next month." I had said yes, like I always did. 3 years later, he called again, this time crying about a car repo. "It's not my fault," he'd said, voice shaking. "They changed the rules. I can't catch up." I caught up for him. Every time, he promised to pay me back. Every time, Mom said, "Don't pressure him. He's trying." He wasn't trying. He was floating, and I was the tide. The years blurred together. 2015, 2018. 2020, each crisis arrived wrapped in the same script, and I always played my part. Quiet savior. The reliable one. The child who never made trouble. I thought I was helping. Now I understood I'd just been training them to believe my stability was theirs to spend. I took another sip of cold coffee and felt the bitterness sit on my tongue. Thanksgiving 2020 rose in my mind like smoke. I'd hosted that year. Cooked for 12. Baked 2 pies from scratch. Dorian arrived late, empty-handed, smelling of bourbon and cologne that probably cost more than my dress. When I set his plate down, Mom smiled at him like he was a war hero returning home. "He's trying," she told me when I complained quietly later. "You always make him feel small." I had smiled back, the way women in this family were trained to. I'd said, "Of course. I didn't mean anything by it." But I had meant it. Every syllable. The burn that had lodged in my throat that night returned now, sharp and clean. The rooftop door creaked. Dr. Jacob stepped out, his scrubs wrinkled, hair disheveled. He looked at me with the kind of concern reserved for colleagues who rarely break composure. "You okay?" he asked, leaning against the railing. "Define okay," I said. He studied me for a second. "You've been off lately." "Not distracted, just heavier." I almost laughed. "Ever been punished for being responsible?" He tilted his head. "All the time. It usually starts as a favor." That line landed deeper than he knew. I nodded slowly. "Yeah. I guess some favors last a lifetime." He didn't press. Jacob wasn't the type. He gave me a quiet nod and went back inside, leaving me alone with the soft hum of rooftop lights and the weight of my own stillness. Inside, the hallways were mostly empty. I stopped by my office, logged into my computer, and opened my personal bank portal. One by one, I checked the accounts I'd once shared or guaranteed for others. My brother's loan from 2018. My mother's home insurance policy, still using my email for renewals. Every trace of me tied to them felt like a shackle I'd forgotten to unlock. I opened a new message to my financial advisor. The words came clean, simple, effective immediately: freeze all co-signing authority under my name. No new joint accounts or third-party permissions. When I hit send, something in me exhaled for the first time in years. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. The quiet act of no longer volunteering for my own exploitation. I leaned back, staring at the cursor blinking in the dim light. My office door was half open. Down the hall, a nurse laughed softly at something on her phone. Ordinary life moved on, indifferent. I envied that. The screensaver flickered, showing the hospital logo. My reflection hovered faintly in the glass, tired, but steady. For the first time, I didn't flinch at it. I'd thought love was patience, endurance, sacrifice. But now I could see it had always been a ledger, and my name had too many charges against it. The clock read 8:14 p.m. I gathered my things and headed for the elevator. The metallic doors slid open with a low hiss. My phone vibrated once in my coat pocket. I didn't look until I reached the parking lot. The preview line on the screen made my stomach tighten. From Mom. Need you to send something urgently. It's for Dorian. I stared at it until the phone dimmed. My breath came out slow. The rain had started again, tapping softly against the windshield. They still thought I was on standby. They still believed kindness was a currency I'd never stop printing. I closed my eyes and rested my head against the steering wheel. The text wasn't surprising. The only surprise was how calm I felt reading it. No panic. No guilt. Just the faint echo of a truth that had waited too long to surface. When you say yes long enough, people stop hearing it as a gift. They start hearing it as permission. The wipers clicked once, clearing a thin sheet of water from the glass. The city lights blurred behind it, golden and distant. I whispered to the empty car, when you say yes long enough, they stop asking. They just take. I didn't answer her message. Not right away. I read it once, then again, watching the words flatten into noise on the screen. Need you to send something urgently. It's for Dorian. There it was, the family rhythm I knew too well. Crisis, demand, silence. Repeat. 2 days later, I found myself driving back to the house I'd grown up in. I told myself it wasn't weakness, it was finality. I needed to see them one last time, to make them understand that my boundaries were no longer up for negotiation. The street looked the same. Maple trees lined the sidewalk, the leaves just beginning to burn orange at the edges. The porch light was already on, though the sun hadn't set yet. That was Mom, always over-prepared for guests, even when she'd stolen from them. I stood at the front door for a long moment before knocking. The same chime sounded inside. I remembered it echoing through my childhood every time I came home late, the sound of being measured, judged. Valora opened the door wearing her favorite cardigan, the one with pearl buttons. Her expression flickered from surprise to control in less than a second. Aradia. I didn't think you'd actually come. I didn't either, I said. The smell hit me first, cinnamon and wax polish. It was exactly the same. Every coaster still on the same table. Every throw pillow arranged with military precision. But the photographs had changed. The walls now displayed Dorian's wedding, his children, his vacations. My face was nowhere. You look thin, Valora said, closing the door softly behind me. I lost 2,600 square feet, I said. Maybe that's it. She blinked, missing the sting or choosing to ignore it. Would you like coffee? Or tea? You always used to drink tea when you were upset. I'm not upset, I said. Just here to finish something. Before she could respond, Dorian appeared from the hallway. He looked freshly showered, the smell of cologne trailing him like entitlement. Well, look who finally crawled out of the ivory tower, he said, flashing a grin. Didn't think you'd show. I'm not here for small talk, I said. Relax, he chuckled. You're always so serious. You should see what we've done with the garage, it's basically a studio now. I'm rebuilding, you know? Trying to get back on track. Thanks for being the safety net, by the way. He said it like a compliment. I turned to Valora. And you co-signed that joke with my blood. Her mouth tightened. Don't be dramatic. We did what had to be done. I walked past them into the kitchen. The counter gleamed, just like always. The same copper pots hung above the stove. For a moment, I could almost see a younger version of myself standing there, stirring soup while Mom criticized the salt. You'll make a fine wife one day, she'd said then. If you ever learn when to stop talking. The memory faded as quickly as it came. Dorian followed, hands in his pockets. You can't stay mad forever. It's family, Aradia. It's just money. Money buys roofs, I said. And you sold mine. Valora sighed loudly, the way she always did before launching into a speech. This isn't about a house. You have money. You're comfortable. This, she gestured around the room, is about helping each other. That's what family does. The words hit me with a strange clarity. How easily she used kindness like a knife, always slicing, never leaving a visible wound. Last year, she forgot my birthday. That night, she transferred $800 to Dorian for therapy support. No card. No call. Just silence, and another transaction dressed as compassion. I opened my phone and scrolled to the folder I'd saved. The document glowed on the screen. I set it on the counter, the light cutting through the warm kitchen air. This is the digital signature used to transfer my house, I said quietly. Time-stamped 48 hours after my surgery. Valora froze. Her hands tightened on the edge of the counter. We thought you wouldn't mind, she said, voice measured, rehearsed. I do. Dorian laughed under his breath. Come on, you're not really going to drag this out, are you? We fixed a mistake. It's not like you were living there. I looked at him, steady. No, you fixed your mistakes by selling mine. Valora's calm began to crack. You have to understand, I did what any mother would do. I couldn't let him fall apart again. You didn't let him fall, I said. You built him a landing made out of my name. The silence that followed felt like a vacuum. Even the ticking clock seemed to hold its breath. I placed printed copies of the deed and verification report on the table. This is your last time seeing these quietly, I said. Valora's voice sharpened. What are you doing? Setting a boundary, I said. Something this family's allergic to. Dorian snorted. So what now? You gonna sue your own mother? If that's what it takes, I replied. You wouldn't, Valora said, almost pleading. I would, I said, softer. But I'm giving you 48 hours to undo what you've done. Reverse the transfer. Admit your part in this mess. Otherwise, I'll let the law speak for me. Valora's face shifted from fear to fury. Are you threatening us? No. I'm telling the truth. And I want to see what it does to you. Her mouth opened and closed like she was searching for the script she'd lost. Dorian looked from her to me, half amused, half offended. God, you're exhausting, he muttered. Always need to be the hero, the martyr. You think this makes you strong? It makes me free, I said. He rolled his eyes. You're being dramatic. I turned toward the doorway. That's the last time I'll explain myself. Valora called after me, voice cracking. Aradia, don't walk away from your family. I paused at the threshold, hand on the doorframe, the scent of cinnamon fading behind me. You stopped being family the moment you sold me like an asset. The evening air outside was cool, almost kind. I walked down the steps slowly, softly, each movement deliberate. The sky was turning violet, the kind of dusk that makes everything look gentler than it is. I got into my car and sat for a long time before starting the engine. My hands trembled, not from weakness but from release. They had expected tears, maybe shouting. They got silence. The one language they'd never learned to read. As I drove away, the house grew smaller in the mirror until it disappeared. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I was reclaiming the space inside myself they'd taken inch by inch. If peace required silence, then it wasn't peace, it was prison. 48 hours came and went. I told myself I would give them that long before acting, one last mercy. 2 days of silence stretched into an answer. No call, no text, no acknowledgement. Just the same aching quiet that had followed every boundary I'd ever tried to set with them. Pride, I realized, doesn't apologize. It waits for you to give in first. The third morning I woke to an email alert from the bank. New credit inquiry. My name again. The subject line blurred as I read it twice. They hadn't stopped, they'd grown bolder. I sat at the edge of the bed, phone in one hand, the same cold anger spreading through my chest that used to burn itself out into guilt. This time it didn't fade. By noon I was walking into Sutton Law's downtown office with a folder so thick it barely closed. The receptionist recognized my name from the call and ushered me into a glass-walled conference room that smelled faintly of paper and lemon cleaner. Attorney Sutton entered a few minutes later, gray-haired, deliberate in his movements, like someone who'd spent a lifetime separating noise from proof. He gestured toward the chair across from him. Dr. Keene. You said you had evidence? I set the folder on the table. Every email. Every document. The deed transfer, the forged signature, the messages between my mother and the buyer. I want this to stop being a family story. I want it on record. He opened the file, adjusting his glasses. You're certain about filing? This isn't emotional anymore, I said. It's legal. He nodded slowly, scanning the pages. Then we'll start 3 processes: fraud complaint, property nullification, and cease and desist notices to all parties involved. He paused, looking up at me. You understand what happens after this. It gets loud. I've lived in their silence long enough, I said. While he printed the first forms, I caught my reflection in the glass wall, same posture, same steady breath I used before surgery. It wasn't fury I saw, it was resolve. When I left the office, the sky was heavy with spring rain. My phone vibrated in my coat pocket. An email from Malik. Subject, about the house. I attended the housewarming last night. It was uncomfortable. They said the previous owner passed away. That can't be true, right? I stopped under the awning, fingers cold on the screen. The housewarming. They hadn't just stolen, they were celebrating it. I typed slowly, each letter deliberate. No. I'm very much alive. Let's talk. The reply came almost instantly. I had a feeling. Call me tomorrow. We'll fix this. Back at the apartment, I poured a glass of wine and sat beside the box of old keys I still hadn't thrown away. The keys felt heavier than metal should, useless things that once opened every door in my life. I ran my thumb over one of them, the one with the tiny blue tag labeled front gate. I'd kept it out of habit, maybe hope. Now it was just evidence of ownership I couldn't prove. The living room was dim except for the yellow glow from a floor lamp. The TV murmured some sitcom laugh track I wasn't watching. In another life, this might have been an evening like any other, quiet, ordinary, survivable. But ordinariness had become foreign. I took another sip of wine and opened the cease and desist draft Sutton had emailed for my review. Every line was clean, factual, without sentiment. Dates, transactions, violations. No room for excuses. No mention of love. It struck me how professional justice sounded, so different from the emotional chaos families used to police each other. Justice didn't plead. It stated. Outside, the rain turned steady again. Drops hit the window like small knocks. Somewhere below, a couple argued in the parking lot, their voices muffled. The world kept turning, indifferent. I envied that, too. I clicked open my voicemail. There were 4 new messages. I deleted the first 3 without listening. The 4th began with her voice, calm, practiced. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but this is family, Aradia. We protect each other. You're hurting yourself more than us. The message ended with silence so long I could hear her breathing. Then the beep. I deleted it. It wasn't protection she wanted, it was control. They always wrapped manipulation in concern. I'm just trying to help. We're doing this for you. You're too emotional to decide right now. Phrases that turned my choices into symptoms. The next day I met Sutton again to sign the filings. He handed me copies with small tabs marking each signature line. Once this is submitted, he said, the county recorder will freeze the title. Your mother and brother will be notified within 72 hours. What about Malik? He's cooperating. His attorney will nullify the sale once the fraud report is active. I exhaled slowly. Good. Then we're done explaining. Sutton smiled faintly. Sometimes that's the hardest part. Driving back through downtown traffic, I watched the wipers slice the gray afternoon into pieces. My phone buzzed again. Malik had sent a photo. The house lit up, balloons tied to the porch rail. A banner over the door read New Beginnings. The caption underneath, they're throwing another party. Another party. Another performance. I imagined guests laughing in rooms I'd painted, drinking under lights I'd strung by hand. Maybe that was what they were good at, rewriting stories mid-scene. At a red light, I scrolled through my contact list until I reached my mother's name. My finger hovered, then moved past it. There was nothing left to say that a court document wouldn't phrase better. That night, I sat at my kitchen counter again, the folder from Sutton beside my wineglass. The paperwork was dry, clinical, yet every sentence carried a strange comfort. It didn't need belief to be true. It only needed proof. I picked up my pen and signed each page. My name looked the same as it always had, firm, clear, alive. When I finished, I set the pen down and leaned back, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the apartment. For the first time, the quiet felt earned, not imposed. My phone buzzed one last time. Another voicemail. I let it play through the speaker while I rinsed my glass. Valora again. You think this makes you strong? It just makes you cruel. After everything I've done for this family. You'll regret turning on us. The line clicked, then silence. I wiped my hands on a towel, walked to the phone, and pressed delete. The message vanished. The silence that followed was clean, almost soft. I whispered into it, they stopped being family when they made me the enemy for having boundaries. A week later, I was standing outside my old house again. The night air was damp, heavy with the smell of wet pine and perfume that drifted from open windows. I could hear the hum of voices, laughter spilling through the yard like it belonged here. My porch, was lined with string lights, the same ones I'd hung myself 2 summers ago. They were glowing warm gold, the way they used to when peace still seemed possible. Cars filled the driveway. Music drifted in waves, too cheerful, too loud. I stayed on the sidewalk for a moment, staring at the house that used to feel like mine. A banner fluttered over the door, white letters catching the porch light, new beginnings. My name wasn't anywhere. People walked in with gifts, covered dishes, bottles of wine. I recognized neighbors I hadn't seen in months. They smiled as they passed me, polite but uncertain, the way people greet someone they almost remember. I moved closer, stopping just outside the gate. Through the living room window, I could see them. My mother in her pearl earrings, glowing under the chandelier. Dorian with a drink in his hand, laughing too loud, his voice the anchor of every conversation. Belora gestured toward the photo wall. New frames. Photos of Dorian's recovery journey. His family, his kids, their vacations, their smiles. Every one of them polished and perfect. My face didn't exist there. It was a hard year, she was telling a woman beside her. But we made it through. You know, some families fall apart when life gets messy. Not us. We pulled together. The woman nodded, admiring. You're lucky, she said. Not everyone gets a second chance. Belora smiled, thin and gracious. We believe in grace. I almost laughed. Grace. That was her favorite disguise. Behind her, I saw Malik. He stood near the corner of the room, uncomfortable, hands in his pockets. His eyes caught mine through the window, and for a moment he didn't move. Then he set down his drink and stepped outside, closing the door softly behind him. Aradia, he said quietly, relief slipping into his voice. You're here. Thank God. I nodded. I won't stay long. I reached into my bag and handed him a sealed envelope. Everything's in there. The filings, the timestamps, the notarized fraud report. He glanced at it, guilt flickering across his face. You're doing the right thing. I hope you kept your receipts, I said, and he gave a small, rueful nod. Inside, the music shifted to something slower. I could hear Dorian making a toast. To family, he said. The crowd echoed it back like a prayer. The words felt obscene. I walked toward the front steps before I could talk myself out of it. The porch light spilled across the ground, soft and steady. My shoes left small prints in the rain. I pushed the door open. The noise quieted like someone had turned the dial down. Faces turned, conversations faltered. Belora froze mid-sentence, the color draining from her face. I'm not here to ruin anything, I said, my voice steady, calm. You've all done enough celebrating for one lifetime. No one moved. I stepped farther inside, the air thick with perfume and tension. The same rug still lay beneath my feet, the one I'd picked out in Portland's old market, the one she'd once said was too bold. Belora recovered first, forcing a smile. Aradia. This is unexpected. I imagine most truths are, I said. Dorian's glass clinked against the table as he set it down. If this is about the paperwork, we already talked. No, I interrupted. You talked. I warned. You ignored. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. This, I said, holding it up, is the DocuSign verification of the forged signature. The bank records showing withdrawals under my name. And the court filing confirming that you transferred property you didn't own. Belora's voice cracked. You shouldn't bring private matters here. This stopped being private when you made me disappear from my own home. Whispers rippled through the room. Someone gasped softly. A man near the doorway whispered, "She's alive." I laid the documents on the wine table, neat and deliberate. For those who've been told otherwise, I'm very much alive. And the deed you're standing on doesn't belong to you. Dorian's jaw tightened. You could have called. I looked at him. You could have listened. He stepped forward. You think this makes you look noble? You're embarrassing yourself. No, I said quietly. I'm correcting a record. Belora reached out as if to calm me, but her hand stopped halfway. Her voice softened, sugar over glass. Aradia, please. You're angry, and that's understandable, but you don't have to destroy your family over pride. My laugh was small, tired. That's rich, coming from the woman who sold mine over greed. The silence that followed felt electric. Everyone was watching now, their eyes darting between us like a tennis match no one had bet on. I looked around the room, at the table I'd refinished myself, the piano I'd paid to restore for her, the photos of a life rewritten to exclude me. I'm not here for revenge, I said. This isn't about punishment. It's about truth. You built this house on a lie. Consider this the demolition. I opened the folder, spreading the papers across the table like cards. Valora's hand trembled. You wouldn't really do this. It's already done, I said. The crowd began to murmur. I caught fragments. Forgery court, she's serious. Dorian tried again, louder now. You always have to make everything about you, don't you? You couldn't let me have one win. This isn't a win, Dorian, I said. It's theft. And you are old enough to know better. He flinched, then looked to our mother for help, but she had no script left to read from. I turned toward the guests. To everyone who believed I was overreacting, check your inbox tomorrow morning. The filings go public at 8. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rain tapping on the glass. I closed the folder, left it on the table beside the untouched cake, and walked to the door. Valora's voice followed me, low and trembling. You'll regret this. I didn't turn. No, Mom. You will. Outside, the air smelled like wet cedar and wine. The first drops of rain caught my hair as I reached the street. I didn't open my umbrella. Each drop felt clean, steady, deserved. Behind me, the house glowed like a lantern, full of whispers, of faces learning that the story had changed. Truth doesn't shout. It shows up dressed in silence and leaves through the front door. I didn't rush home after the party. I didn't drive in circles or cry behind the wheel. I stopped for gas, folded my coat in the passenger seat, and drove to Sutton Law instead. Their office was closed, but the glass dropbox outside gleamed under the streetlight. I fed the envelope through the slot gently, almost reverently, like passing a note into something sacred. I stood there for a moment longer than I meant to, letting the quiet fall around me like a second skin. By Monday, it began. The complaint was filed: real estate fraud, identity theft, misuse of power of attorney. Sutton submitted the full package: deeds, email headers, timestamps. A case ID was issued with all the ceremony of a library checkout. No gavel. No outrage. Just a number. But it felt heavier than anything I'd carried since the hospital. I sat across from Sutton in the same glass conference room where we first spoke. The sun filtered in through the blinds, cutting across the table like long blades of truth. He walked me through the next steps. The county recorder would freeze the title, the buyer's attorney would begin withdrawal proceedings, and the IRS had been notified. Most of these cases settle quietly, he said, looking over his glasses. But I suspect yours won't. I don't want quiet anymore, I said. I want clarity. He nodded once. We'll pursue it fully. There was no one to call after I left. No one I trusted to share the news. I took myself to a small bakery down the block, ordered a muffin I didn't finish, and sat by the window like I had all the time in the world. It was raining again, Portland's soft gray drizzle, like the sky was tired of emotion. 2 days later, I got confirmation that the county had accepted the filing. The title was locked. The court issued a notice to Valora and Dorian. Malik's attorney filed an addendum acknowledging the fraudulent transaction. Valora didn't call. Not this time. She disappeared. Malik confirmed it over text. She's left town. Quietly. No forwarding address. That night, I found myself at the hospital again, not to work, just to walk. The halls were comforting in their sterility. The beeping, the scent of antiseptic, the way no one stopped me to ask what I was carrying. I stopped in the atrium, sat on a bench near the fountain, and let the quiet fill me. The next morning, I heard from Hestia. Her message was short: the porch light's back on. Thought you'd want to know. I stared at the screen for a long moment. My old porch. The one Valora said was too much work to maintain. The one I used to string lights on every fall. I typed, not ready to return. But I might drive by. And I did. That night, around dusk. I took the long way, let the neighborhoods pass me by like faded memories. When I turned the corner onto Hawthorne Lane, I saw the house glowing softly under the porch light. No balloons. No banners. Just the stillness of something waiting. I didn't stop. Just drove by. But something inside me released, gently, quietly, like a pressure I hadn't realized was pressing. 3 days later, I was called to attend Dorian's hearing. Sutton insisted I be there, even if I didn't testify. Sometimes, he said, you need to see how it ends. The courtroom was small, sterile. A bench with peeling wood. A clerk with tired eyes. Dorian sat at the defendant's table alone. He didn't look at me when I walked in. His suit was too big, like it had been borrowed or pulled from the back of a closet reserved for funerals and shame. His wife was seated 2 rows behind him. Her arms were crossed. She didn't say a word. The IRS agent read through 5 flagged accounts, each tied to money moved under my name, under Mom's signature. The judge barely raised his voice. No dramatics. Just numbers. Just decisions. When the bankruptcy was confirmed, Dorian bowed his head. His wife stood. She didn't touch him. She didn't even pause. She walked out of the courtroom, her heels soft against the floor. He didn't follow. I sat there long after the ruling. Sutton gathered the papers, patted my shoulder once, and left. I watched the room empty until it was just me and the echo of consequences. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time all week. It hit my face like a blessing, not triumphant, but grounding. I closed my eyes for a breath. Not pride. Not revenge. Completion. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my email. I sat at the kitchen counter and flipped through the court documents. 1 page at a time. There was no applause. No parade. Just lines of text that proved what I'd known all along. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cruel. I was right. Later that evening, I walked the neighborhood loop I used to avoid. I passed houses with porch swings, Halloween decorations, someone grilling steaks in the driveway. It smelled like family. For the first time, I didn't flinch at the thought. Before bed, I lit a candle. I used to do that before surgeries, just a small ritual to center myself. This time, it wasn't for focus. It was for grace. My phone buzzed again. A final message from Valora. No words. Just an old photo, me and Dorian as kids on the porch steps, grinning, covered in popsicle stains. I remembered the moment. I remembered how hot the day had been. But I couldn't remember who had taken the picture. I stared at it for a moment, then pressed delete. That version of us was gone. I whispered into the quiet room, justice doesn't roar. It arrives with paperwork and peace. Morning came without ceremony. No sharp light through the blinds, no birdsong or alarm. Just a hush that settled into the bones of my new home like it had always belonged there. My feet touched the hardwood floor without hesitation. For once, I didn't brace myself for the day. The apartment was small, cozier than I used to think I could tolerate. A galley kitchen, a short hallway, a living room just big enough for 2 chairs and a bookshelf. But the quiet was honest. The windows let in just enough sun. Nothing grand, nothing guarded. I brewed coffee the way I used to before I stopped trying to please anyone. No fancy creamers, no sugar. Just the way I liked it, bold, plain. The cup warmed my hands as I stood by the balcony door, watching leaves shift along the sidewalk. A pair of children rode bikes beneath the trees, their laughter rising and falling like a wind chime. This was peace, not perfection. It wasn't earned by punishing others, it was preserved by no longer punishing myself. When the knock came, I didn't flinch. Hestia stood on the other side, holding a paper bag and 2 travel mugs. Her lipstick was slightly smudged, and her cardigan was buttoned wrong. I brought muffins. You look like you haven't been feeding your spirit. I let her in. She moved through the space like someone who knew how to respect walls. We sat at the small round table by the window, a silence settling between us that didn't ask for apology. She sipped her coffee first, made a face, then smiled. You could have sued them harder. I laughed softly. I didn't want to win. I just wanted to stop bleeding. She reached across the table, her hand a gentle landing on mine. And you did. Quietly, gracefully. In ways they'll never understand. We didn't talk much more after that. We didn't need to. After she left, I noticed the envelope on the floor by the door. It hadn't been there when I woke. No postage. No return address. Just my name, Aradia, in handwriting I knew better than my own. Valora's. I stared at it for a long time, holding it like something that might burn. My thumb brushed the seal. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Some stories don't need to be reread to be remembered. I placed the envelope on the windowsill, beside the small orchid that had somehow survived both my negligence and the move. Not today. Maybe not ever. An hour later, my phone buzzed. One new message. From Dorian. I'm trying now. No, No punctuation. No apologies. I typed a full sentence before deleting it. Rewrote it. Deleted it again. In the end, I sent 2 words, good. Not cold. Not cruel. Just complete. That was all I had to give. I opened the laptop and clicked through the legal aid forms I'd been drafting. It had started as a scribbled idea in a notebook beside my bed. Now it had a name, the Keene Justice Initiative. Mission, to help women who've been financially manipulated by the people they trusted most, mothers, siblings, partners, spouses. The paperwork was almost done. I double-checked the bylaws, scanned through grant eligibility, then clicked Submit. It wasn't revenge. It was reconstruction. A way to take what I knew and build something that could hold someone else upright when the world tried to bend them. I didn't want statues or statements. I wanted resources, legal support, a voice louder than guilt and prettier than apology. The final screen loaded, confirmation received. I closed the laptop. Outside, the sky had shifted. Still gray, but softer. I walked onto the balcony barefoot, the cool concrete grounding. Below, the children were back, drawing chalk rainbows on the sidewalk. One waved. I waved back. I didn't want my house back. I didn't want them to grovel. I didn't need anyone to say I was right anymore. Because I already was. I'd survived being erased. I'd written myself back in, not as their daughter, not as their scapegoat, but as my own witness. Forgiveness hadn't come. Maybe it never would. But peace didn't wait for it. You don't need to forgive to be free. You just have to stop waiting to be seen by the ones who never looked. Not every wound needs revenge to heal. Sometimes, the quietest freedom comes from simply choosing not to carry what they tried to hand you. Have you ever had to walk away from people who called it love while using your name like currency? Tell me below. I read every story you share. If this spoke to something in you, subscribe for more true, soft-spoken battles like this one. Real pain. Real voice. Real endings, without screaming. See you in the next story.